November 1942 found Britain fighting a war that depended on access rather than firepower. In occupied Europe, doors were closed, conversations monitored, and trust weaponized by the occupiers. Resistance movements did not fail from lack of will, but from the impossibility of moving safely through offices, checkpoints, and interrogation rooms. Every meeting demanded paperwork. Every decision passed across a desk. It was within this bureaucratic terrain that an unassuming instrument became lethal. The fountain pen mattered because it belonged everywhere the enemy felt secure. It was expected, welcomed, and handled without thought. British covert planners recognized that assassination did not always require force. It required plausibility. By embedding death inside a gesture of routine administration, they created a tool that operated in silence and left confusion behind. Technically simple yet psychologically profound, the poison fountain pen delivered its effect at conversational distance. It required no pursuit, no struggle, and no sound. Its power lay in certainty rather than spectacle. Once used, it dissolved into the setting, indistinguishable from any other pen on the desk. Beyond its operational value, the device altered behavior. It introduced doubt into offices, meetings, and exchanges once considered safe. The pen's legacy is not measured in numbers, but in hesitation, proof that even the most ordinary object could no longer be trusted. The desk is clean and carefully kept, the papers stacked in neat lines as if order alone can hold the room together. Nothing here suggests danger. Outside the window, the street carries on as it has all day. People pass, cars move, life continues without pause. Inside, two men sit across from one another, separated by polished wood and habit. Their voices are calm. Their faces reveal nothing. This is not a place where fear is shown openly. It is a place where questions are asked quietly and answers are expected to sound reasonable. The fountain pen rests on the blotter between them. It looks ordinary, the kind found in any office, the kind touched 100 times a day without thought. One of the men reaches for it, not in haste, not with tension, but with the ease of routine. His fingers know the shape. The weight feels right. This pen has likely signed papers before. It has likely passed across desks like this many times. For a moment, no ink touches paper. The pause is normal. Words are considered. Decisions take shape. The pen is held, then gently offered across the desk. The other man accepts it without hesitation. There is no reason to refuse. A pen is a pen. It is warm from the previous hand, a small detail that barely registers. Nothing about the exchange draws attention. No one leans forward. No one watches closely. There is nothing to see. The movement that follows is slight, almost respectful. The pen is brought forward as if to point or to emphasize a thought. There is a brief pause, no longer than a breath. Then the tip makes contact. There is no sound, no sharp motion, no sign that anything has gone wrong. The room does not react because there is nothing obvious to react to. A few seconds pass before the change is felt. The man who received the pen stops speaking mid-sentence. His expression shifts, not to panic, but to confusion. It is the look of someone trying to understand why a simple act suddenly feels wrong. He adjusts in his chair. The words do not return. The other man remains still, watching without moving. The silence deepens, but it is not the silence of alarming. Chairs scrape softly as someone stands, unsure why they are doing so. The room seems to tilt slightly, as if balance itself has been disturbed. No one yet understands what has happened. There is no blood, no wound, no clear cause, only a sudden absence where control once was. The fountain pen lies where it was set down, resting among papers and folders. It looks unchanged. It could be picked up again and used without anyone suspecting its purpose. To the eye, it remains exactly what it appears, a simple tool of writing in a room built on rules and records. Questions will come later. Officials will replay the moment in their minds, searching for a mistake they can name. But for now, there is only uncertainty. The office, so carefully arranged, no longer feels secure. The men inside it sense that something ordinary has betrayed them, though they cannot yet say how or why. The pen stays on the desk, silent and still, having done what it was made to do, waiting to be overlooked once more as the room struggles to understand what just slipped through its hands. As the war spread deeper into Europe, control no longer came only from soldiers on the streets or cells in prisons. It came from desks, forms, and questions asked behind closed doors. Occupation worked through paperwork. Permits decided who could travel. Lists decided who would be questioned. Interviews decided who was trusted and who disappeared. Resistance fighters learned that survival depended not just on hiding in shadows, but on passing through offices, waiting rooms, and interrogation spaces where power was quiet and absolute. Many critical moments happened indoors, seated across from officials who believed they were safe because they were surrounded by rules, rank, and routine. In these places, the usual tools of violence failed. A gun was useless the moment it was seen. The sound alone could seal a person's fate within seconds. Knives required strength, speed, and a struggle that left marks no one could explain away. Even traditional poisoning depended on chance. It took time to work, time that was rarely available. It also depended on access to food or drink, which was never certain in controlled settings. Offices and interrogation rooms offered no space to recover from a mistake. Doors were watched. Witnesses were close. Any delay could mean arrest or death. British intelligence understood that the battlefield had shifted. The enemy was strongest where things looked calm and orderly. Meetings were polite. Questions were formal. Violence was not expected in such places, which made any obvious weapon stand out at once. What agents needed was not power but acceptance. They needed something that belonged in these rooms as much as files and stamps did. Something that could be carried openly, placed on a desk, and handled without drawing a second look. It had to be ordinary enough to disappear into routine, yet effective enough to act in a single instant. There could be no warning signs, no unusual movements, no preparation that looked out of place. The method had to work at arm's length and be finished before anyone understood what was happening. There would be no chance to escape if the attempt failed. The object used would need to complete its task without noise, without struggle, and without leaving a clear explanation behind. It had to fit inside the slow, careful rhythm of administration, not break it. The occupiers trusted the systems they built. They trusted desks, documents, and the tools that made authority feel permanent. They believed danger came from the street, not from the table in front of them. This belief was their shield, but it was also a weakness. Every signature required a pen. Every decision passed through one. These objects were touched constantly and thought about rarely. No one questioned them because questioning them would mean questioning the entire system. The problem facing British planners was how to turn this habit against itself. How to introduce certainty into moments built on procedure. How to make a single action final without disturbing the calm that surrounded it. The answer could not look like a weapon. It had to look like work. It had to move through the same channels as paper and ink, accepted without thought, trusted until the moment trust no longer mattered. The need was not for something dramatic, but for something precise, something that could exist quietly inside the enemy's own routines and wait for the exact second when routine became vulnerability. The fountain pen was chosen because it already belonged in the world where it would be used. There was nothing unusual about it, and that was the point. In offices across occupied Europe, pens were everywhere. They were picked up without thought, passed between people without pause, and placed on desks without care. British planners understood that the safest way to hide something dangerous was not to disguise it heavily, but to make it so normal that no one questioned it. From the outside, this pen looked no different from any other. Its shape, weight, and feel were familiar. Anyone holding it would recognize it instantly as a simple tool meant for writing, not as something to fear. Inside, however, the pen was built for one clear purpose and nothing more. It was not designed to perform many tasks or to be used again and again. It was meant to work once, correct, and without drawing attention. The design avoided complicated parts because complicated things fail, especially in moments of stress. Instead, the pen relied on a simple method that responded only to deliberate contact. It would not activate by accident. It required intent, but not strength. This was important in rooms where sudden movements could raise suspicion and where even small signs of struggle could bring immediate danger. The poison inside the pen was selected carefully. It had to act quickly and reliably, using only a very small amount. Speed mattered because time was the enemy. A slow effect would create confusion that lasted too long, giving witnesses time to react or intervene. A fast effect ended the moment before it could become a scene. There was no need for force, no need for repetition. One controlled action was enough. Sound was treated as a threat to be eliminated. The pen produced no noise when used, no click, no snap, nothing that could draw the ear. There was also no flash or visible sign that anything unusual had happened. The goal was not to shock the room, but to leave it unchanged for as long as possible. Even after use, the pen could be set back down among papers and folders where it blended in perfectly. There was no obvious mark on the body to explain what had occurred. This absence of signs was not accidental. It was part of the design. The pen was meant to disappear back into its surroundings, to become just another object on a desk while people struggled to understand what they had just seen. From a technical point of view, the thinking behind the pen was strict and practical. It was not meant to scare anyone by its appearance. It was not meant to leave a message. It was meant to complete its task and then vanish into normal life again. Its success was judged not by how dramatic the moment was, but by how quickly routine returned after it was used. The ideal result was not panic, but delay, confusion rather than alarm, questions rather than answers. In that space of uncertainty, the pen had done exactly what it was built to do, proving that in a war fought quietly, the most effective designs were those that allowed ordinary life to continue, even as it concealed something final beneath its surface. In occupied cities, the poisoned fountain pen travelled quietly through places built on control and routine. It moved through offices taken over by authority, through interview rooms where questions were asked again and again, and through temporary headquarters set up inside schools, hotels, or private homes. It was carried the same way as letters and forms, resting in pockets or briefcases without notice. When it appeared on a desk, it did not change the mood of the room. Belonged there. No one asked why it was present, because a pen was always present. It passed from hand to hand during ordinary exchanges and returned just as easily, leaving no reason for concern. When the pen was used, the effect was sudden but confusing. Conversations stopped in the middle of sentences. A man might pause, frown, or shift in his chair, as if something small had gone wrong. There was no cry for help, no sign of attack. To those watching, it looked like weakness or illness. Authority faded not with force, but with uncertainty. People hesitated because they did not understand what they were seeing. That hesitation mattered. It bought time. It allowed the person who had used the pen to remain calm, to stay seated, or even to assist, appearing concerned like everyone else. Suspicion did not arrive immediately. Confusion came first, and confusion was enough. The scenes that followed were rarely dramatic. There was no rush of guards or loud response. Often the room simply emptied slowly as someone went to fetch help. The lack of visible injury made it hard to act quickly. Medical explanations were offered. Stress was blamed. The moment passed without clarity. By the time questions began to form, the chance to connect cause and effect had already slipped away. Later, investigations struggled to find answers. There were no obvious marks to explain what had happened. No clear sign pointed to an attack. Files were reviewed. Witnesses were questioned. Stories changed slightly with each telling. Rumors filled the gaps left by facts. Administrative staff who depended on order and predictability began to feel uneasy. If something so final could happen without warning, then the system they trusted was no longer solid. Meetings became tense. Small actions were watched more closely. Fear entered places that once felt controlled. For those who carried the poisoned fountain pen, the experience was different and heavier. Using it meant being close. There was no distance, no cover, no separation. The person holding the pen had to look directly at the person across the desk. They had to speak, listen, and wait for the right moment. The act could not be disguised as chaos or battle. It happened inside calm conversation, in quiet rooms, among paper and ink. Once done, it could not be undone. This closeness changed how agents understood their role. Each meeting carried weight. Each exchange could be final. Everyday gestures took on new meaning because they could no longer be separated from consequence. The pen turned routine into risk, not just for the target, but for the one using it. It demanded control of the hand and of the mind. There was no room for anger or haste, only decision. In this way, the poisoned fountain pen did more than remove individuals. It reshaped how covert work felt to those involved. It blurred the line between ordinary life and silent violence, forcing agents to carry that knowledge with them long after the room had emptied and the desk had been cleared. As normal routines quietly resumed around an absence, no one could fully explain. As word of the poisoned fountain pen spread, often through rumor rather than proof, its effect began to reach far beyond the moments when it was actually used. Offices that once ran on habit and certainty grew tense. Small pauses appeared where none had existed before. Clerks watched hands more closely. Officials hesitated before accepting items that had always been passed without thought. The simple act of handing someone a pen no longer felt harmless. It carried a quiet question that could not be asked out loud. Trust, which administration depended on, began to weaken from the inside. This unease did more damage than open force ever could. Work slowed. Meetings lost their calm rhythm. Authority relied on confidence, and confidence relies on routine. When routine became uncertain, control followed. No order could fully protect against something that looked normal and behaved normally until it did not. The fear was not loud or dramatic. It settled into everyday moments, making people doubt what they could see and what they could safely touch. Other nations used silent methods of killing as well. There were tools designed to strike without sound, to leave little trace, to end life quietly. But these methods still announced intent. They turned a moment into an attack. The poisoned fountain pen did something different. It hid intention inside cooperation. It did not interrupt a meeting. It did not break the rules of the room. It worked because both sides were doing what was expected of them. One person offered a tool. The other accepted it. That shared act made the result harder to process and harder to prevent. Psychologically, this reversed the balance of control. Occupiers believed safety came from structure and procedure. The pen used those same systems against them. It required no resistance, only participation. This made it deeply unsettling. There was no clear defense against it. Without questioning everything, every desk became a possible risk. Every exchange carried a shadow. Even when the device was no longer used, the uncertainty it created remained. Once people understood that an object so common could be dangerous, that knowledge could not be erased. The pen could not be easily identified or reliably detected. There was no way to be certain which one was harmless and which was not. This meant suspicion had no clear end. It lingered, changing behavior long after the immediate threat had passed. In this way, the poisoned fountain pen left a legacy that went beyond wartime operations. It challenged a basic belief about safety in familiar places. Desks, documents, and writing tools had always symbolized order and control. Afterward, they carried a trace of doubt. The device showed that power did not always need noise or force. It could exist quietly, hidden in expectation and habit. In the wider story of covert warfare, the pen represents a way of thinking rather than a single solution. It proved that the most effective weapon could be one that no one thought to fear. Its impact was not measured by destruction, but by hesitation. Long after officers returned to their routines, that hesitation remained, shaping how people moved, interacted, and trusted. Discomfort it created did not fade with the end of its use. It stayed behind in the ordinary spaces of daily life, where a simple object could never again be assumed to be just what it seemed.